of you are familiar faces. Some of you have presented on Q&A with PNJ, but this is a project that we started in July of last year to provide educational content online. Obviously, things are starting to open up. People are starting to have events in person, but we're still finding that the online content adds a lot of value. And this is a special segment of the series that is focused on providing content that's really helpful for potentially previous TENMO sites or current TENMO sites, as well as all historic sites. And this is this one is very near and dear to my heart. I think public relations is a big thing that Preservation New Jersey believes can help historic sites. Part of the reason we do our 10 most endangered historic places list every year is to get those headlines, get people thinking about preservation in a way that they might not in their day-to-day lives, and kind of reach new audiences. So I'm excited to have Maria here today with all of you, because Maria is, well, first of all, she's on Preservation New Jersey's marketing committee, and she writes our Historic Preservation Commission spotlight articles. But she's a journalist who's written for newspapers across the country. She's penned a column in the New Jersey Courier News for several years. And she's also the chair of the Westfield Historic Preservation Commission. And so she just has a great background in both kind of public relations and in historic preservation that she's going to focus in on in our presentation today. And she and her husband, Jim, live in a beautiful Victorian. I added in that part in Westfield, where they spend their free time when not working. So thank you, Maria, for being here. I'm going to spotlight Maria on the screen so you all can see her. And if you're not speaking right now, if you can just mute yourself, that would be great, so we can all kind of focus and hear Maria. So let's get started.
All right, thank you, Emily, and thank you, everyone. It's great to be here, and it's interesting to see a lot of people on commissions and societies being here. And welcome to Westfield, Peter. I think I was muted when you mentioned. So well, that's fantastic. I have a hometown person here. So yes, as Emily said, I have a degree in communications, and I've worked in public relations and journalism throughout my career. And for the last several years, I've been very much involved in historic preservation. And I find that it is one of the most common laments of people that are involved in historic preservation. They're like, how do we generate media attention? How do we get people involved that, you know, they kind of like old sites and old places, but they don't really know much about it, and they don't think it's that interesting, and certainly younger people as well. So hopefully this presentation will give you guys an idea. And so Emily, thanks for being my IT person. So we thought we'd start at the just very basics of public relations. It's the practice of leveraging media to promote your organization and cultivate a positive public perception. At its core, public relations is about influencing, engaging, and building a relationship with key stakeholders across numerous platforms in order to shape and frame the public perception of an organization. And I will add that certainly with commissions and societies, you know, education is very much an aspect of that as well. So the basic elements of PR is preparing press releases, fostering media relationships, creating the story, coordinating events, and then keeping the conversation going. So we'll start with the press release. I mean, 7 basic elements. You know, I hear a lot from people that don't have a marketing or journalism or a PR background, and are highly educated, and they're just like, Maria, I don't know, but what do I put in a press release? How, you know, what do I leave in? What do I take out? And I think, you know, we wanted to just sort of demystify the process. It's very simple, and if you break it down, and I have a sample on the next slide, but basically it's the headline, a dateline, an intro, or a subhead sometimes, the body of the release, a boilerplate, one fantastic photo or several, and then of course the contact info. So here's a sample, and I wanted, you know, it's always good to keep a release to 1 page if you can, you know, unless there's a lot of historical content that you need to add. I wouldn't do that in the introductory release. And even back in the olden days when we were sending things by snail mail, you know, we really try to just make everything concise, to the point, one page. So this is just, I thought, a good example of just doing exactly that. You have the date line at the top. Usually it's always for immediate release. In some instances, and it's usually if there's something very secretive, you know, a release might say, hold until Friday, you know, this date. But I think today with everything online, you want to send your release out at the time that you want it to be able to be printed. Contact info, of course, should always be in there. Oh, also on the top, put it on your letterhead, pop a logo in there if you don't have letterhead yet. But it's good to have the name of your company and also contact info several times if you can.
And
headline, go ahead.
I was just saying, Maria, and so when we do our 10 most, we do say, don't release this until after noon on the day of the announcement, or else nobody would come, right? So
so that's very interesting, Emily. So you give them the winners,
yeah,
but you tell them to hold the date.
The day before or the morning of. So just as an example of when you might use that. So
thank you. I think it's been so long since I've used anything like that. Yeah, I mean, I'm always like, print it now, get it online.
Yep.
It's a great example. Thank you.
Yep.
So yeah, so headline, you know, Enduro Shield glass coating protecting spire of One World Trade Center. So everything you kind of really need to know is here. And it's also important, you know, it's funny because sometimes I've had people give me releases. If you can go back one moment to the last slide, Emily. Sometimes I've had people give me releases that don't have the name of the company or the organization in the headline. It'll say, come here, join us here. And, you know, because everything is online, it's important if it's in the headline, it's more easily searchable. If you get to it in the body, it doesn't always pop up as something that might come up if you're searching for it. So yes, and everything else, subhead, intro, body is the meat of it. Quote from spokesperson. I think this is interesting because you want your quote to be somewhat endearing, maybe even pull at your heartstrings a little bit. We are honored that our product is helping protect part of such a symbolic and meaningful building, said Adrian Ray. You know, he's a business development director. Then you have a few more info here, again, with your website at the bottom, the attached photo, and then your boilerplate is at the bottom. And the boilerplate is something that you will use on every release. It just is you know, it always speaks to your organization. And we started one for the HPC, and it simply says, it's our mission statement, you know, basically established by municipal ordinance, Westfield's Historic Preservation Commission is charged with preserving historical sites and structures while fostering an appreciation for these landmarks as an essential element of the town's unique character. And then for more info, we have our website on the town government website, and then our email. Okay, thanks. Next slide. So who do you send these releases to? You want to create a list of media contacts, but before that, I think I know that it is best to appoint one media contact within your organization. And that could certainly be the chair, if you're a historic preservation person, or, you know, the executive director of an organization, but it doesn't have to be. You know, the most important thing about the media contact is someone that will answer all the questions in a timely manner if a journalist reaches out, and is always thinking about how to best promote the next thing. And oftentimes the chair or the executive director, you know, is not thinking that way. I've spoken to a number of chairs who are attorneys, and they're just like, you know, that's not within my bandwidth. It doesn't occur to me. And sometimes I'll say, you know, do you even have a young volunteer or someone that is devoted to helping out with the organization? Make that person your, because they're always on their phone. They're always looking at when the best way to get back to some, you know, they can easily answer an email within seconds. And that really is a great asset to have in your media contact. Spokespeople, it's obviously good to have one spokesperson to begin with, but then that can be interchangeable. And in fact, it's good to switch it up at times. For your list of media contacts, you want to think local, regionally, nationally, and then of course, print, broadcast, and online. And I think in this aspect, just remember that no media outlet is too small or too large. You know, for local, there's the local papers, there's a tap into, the patches, you know, I think they're pretty specific to each town. Most towns have one. Regional, you know, NJ.com tends to, I know Star Ledger and NJ.com are interchangeable, but many things that might be online don't ultimately make it to the paper. Sometimes vice versa, although I think everything in the paper does ultimately end up online, but online might have a broader reach at this point. You know, sadly, paper magazines and newspapers are not as, are dwindling and can oftentimes just end up on a coffee table or the recycling bin and not be seen. And then of course, national. Don't be afraid to contact them, and don't be surprised if they don't get back to you, but there might, once you have them on your list and they just kind of get used to seeing you. And then certainly if you get, as you grow, if you get some regional coverage, send them the link. Oh, look what New Jersey Monthly just said about us. You know, because it'll be on the New Jersey Monthly website as well. And then that generates more interest. It's like, okay, well, this organization is growing and maybe it's worth covering. Or certainly the New Jersey section editor of the New York Times. Well, I'm always looking for content. Okay, they're gaining some attention. Let me look a little more closely at this organization. And then of course, don't forget about social media. It can be very scary, I know, to certainly people my age and above and even below. And I don't want to be on Facebook, and what's Instagram, and you can't ignore it. And I have a case study at the end, which will show you how important it can be, for sure. So if it's not, again, something that you want to do, assign it to someone and let them run with it. You know, oversee it, but I think it's important to be, 100% you have to be online and within social media. Next slide. So creating the story, what's the hook? So you want to grab the attention to lure the reader in 10 words or less. And it's funny because I looked at the example that I pulled, and it is exactly 10 words. Enduro Shield's glass coating, protecting spire of One World Trade Center. So the hook, I think it's interesting that they put protecting, you know, you use action verbs and keywords that relate to your subject. They could say the Enduro Shield glass coating is on the spire at the World Trade Center, or, as an element, but by personifying it in a sense, by making it protecting, and then of course, World Trade Center being also something that lures you in, I think is very effective. And then piggyback on a news story whenever possible. Something we've done recently, we just did recently as an example of that, is that last year we awarded, or actually it was pre-pandemic, we have something called the Devlin Awards here in Westfield, where it started about a decade ago, and then it kind of died out, and then they were resurrected recently as we've sort of revitalized the commission. And they are awards that are given to local architects and builders that preserve a site with integrity or add on to it. They have different categories. And one of the categories we had 2 years ago was an essay contest. And it was won by a young high school student who wrote an essay about walking down Boulevard through the eyes of an Irish maid, or, it was a really lovely essay. And he came and he read the essay, and we awarded him a certificate and got some media attention about it. And then we just saw a few weeks back that this young high school student just won a poetry contest on a broader sense and more of a I think it might have been a national poetry contest, but he was in the news again. So we took that link and we put it on our Facebook page, and we said, congratulations to so-and-so for winning this, award. And we knew him when, and just kind of made a fun little post about it. So anything that can just sort of piggyback on any news story is always good to use, for sure. And then the 5 W's of journalism, you of course want to answer them always: who, what, where, when, and why, and then sometimes how. Next slide. So creating an event. So I just started to pull some stuff off to give examples here. You want to play off local and national dates on the calendar. So I literally just, Googled national calendar dates, and a whole bunch of stuff came up. And one of the things that intrigued me here in the March date was the Hug a Soldier Day. So if there is someone involved with the war, or soldiers that are, associated with your site, you could create an event off of that. Or certainly on the February 23rd date, there was National Tile Day. So then I saw what happens on National Tile Day, and in 2019, a children's museum created a whole craft event on creating their own tiles. So, it could be anything. There's a flower day there. If you are planting flowers around your site, then have the event on that day. If you're thinking of having it sometime around that month anyway, create the day, and it's just one more national day. There's truly a gazillion national days that you can play off of. So that goes along. Oh, sorry. Yeah, that's all right. So it just goes along with creating multiple experiences, doing soft openings, inviting various audiences. You can invite children to one event and adults to another event that same evening, along with the same theme. So families and children. And then always, always, always social media before, social media afterwards. Okay, next slide. So then finally, keep the conversation going. So, this is a combination of everything we've just talked about, and I actually have a case study and just a number of examples in the final slides that will give you a good idea as to how this works. Certainly, news events, again, great way to continue to keep the conversation going. Mix up your guests. You can have guest spokespeople, you can have a local celebrity, you could have a politician, a local politician or above, and also perhaps a donor, that is very important. And so you can bring him in as a spokesperson. Changing up your perspective, looking at it from different audience points of view. Collaborate with similar organizations. That's always a really great idea in terms of, again, if you guys are reaching, we will do things with the Westfield Historical Society here in Westfield. I mean, people confuse us anyway. So we make a point, and I hear that's very typical, right? So we make a point of distinguishing, each of us, but at the same time, we have the same mission statement, more or less. And the Westfield Historical Society, in fact, has just started collaborating with a lot. They just did something with the Rake and Hose, the Garden Club, and then the Library Club and the Park organization. So it's a really great way to combine your lists and generate a lot of attention that way. And then don't be afraid to steal ideas. One of the things that for the case study that the executive director said to me, she said, it's for the Harriet Tubman Museum. And she said, oftentimes I would just look at what the African American Museum was doing in DC and thought, oh, okay, that makes sense. That's coming up. We'll do it for our event as well. So next slide, I kind of go into the Harriet Tubman Museum. I just happened to cover it for the spring newsletter, which is coming out very soon. And it was a very interesting example because it was in 2012, this home, the structure, the Howell House, which is a parsonage of a church in Cape May, was part of the 10 most endangered places for under NJ preservation NJ. And recent research had proven that not only was Cape May part of the Underground Railroad, but it also, that Harriet Tubman had a very strong presence in Cape May. She had worked in some of their bed and breakfasts and and was a part of this organization. So I spoke to their executive director and I said, you know, you've come such a long way, because they, in the last 2 years, they have been mentioned in Smithsonian Magazine as one of the most anticipated museum openings for 2020, which is when they were originally supposed to open, and then the pandemic happened. USA Today is one of the 10 most interesting museums. Time Out, New York, you know, they've gotten some really great coverage. And I said, do you have, you know, I'd love to use you as a case study. She said, great. I said, well, do you have any sort of template or any, you know, thoughts that you can give it? And so these are some of her quotes. And then in addition, she said, look at my Facebook page. And that's where I just pulled some screenshots to give you guys some ideas. But her quotes: always be redirecting and readdressing the story, give them all the information they need. So that's a who, what, where, why, when. Local press leads to regional, leads to national. Don't be afraid to, you know, continue to generate those leads. Reach out to local officials. They had Governor Murphy do their virtual opening during the pandemic. Set up interviews, check the calendar for dates, and then look at other organizations and what they're doing. So the next few slides, I'll just point out some of the very examples. So again, I imagine everyone's pretty familiar with Facebook, but a few quick screenshots. You know, here, when they had Governor Murphy open, they made it their cover photo. So every time you change within an organization, either your profile shot or your cover shot, the people that follow you get a notification on their homepage. Oh, Harriet Tubman just, so if I happen to miss that news story, I see that they just updated their cover shot. Oh, wait, who's that? It's Governor Murphy. And then I can look down and see what that was all about. Fundraisers. So this was really sweet, because the top one is 250 raised for Harriet Tubman, but there are there's lots of on their fundraiser page that goes into the several thousands of dollars. Next slide. The about page really gives you everything you need. Their website, their mission statement, the fact that they're a nonprofit organization. It makes it very easy to send a message. Everything's at your fingertips with social media, which is why I say it's so important. And then, of course, the event page. Photos and live are self-explanatory, but the event page gives you an idea to upcoming events and then past events. And their most recent past event was just this past Saturday on Juneteenth, where they had the grand in-person opening. And in fact, that opening they have on their Facebook page, on their YouTube channel. They did it Facebook Live. So they have a number of ways to generate interest in this. And then, of course, they had a lot of media covering it as well. So next slide. So I'm kind of going backwards in terms of their timeline. So this was the event, and they link it to their YouTube page for their event. Here's another link to their YouTube page in the middle, which is just a different spokesperson talking about getting to know the museum on Facebook. And just to give you guys an idea too, so look at this middle photo. It's 212 likes, 7 comments, but 39 shares. So that's a broad reach, more so than you can get sometimes from a local newspaper article. You know, I mean, we used to say in PR, if it's a magazine that sits in the dentist's office, you know, you get a lot more readership depending on where it ends up. But online, it's real-time shares, and you know it's getting viewed. And then I thought this was a great example, the last picture here, of, again, parlaying, you know, piggybacking on a news event. So, and it's obviously feel good. Congratulations to the friend of the Harriet Tubman Museum, to Khan Fishaw Sr. on his historic promotion to Chief of Police. And then they link to the NJ.com article. He's the first Black man to hold this office. It's not about Harriet Tubman, but it is related. And the beauty of an organization like this is that you can, and any really Facebook page, is that you can treat it a little bit like your own Facebook page. And I'll tell you, in a similar sense, I attended an African-American trolley tour, the first one we did in Westfield this past Saturday. And I just put a few pictures and posted about it on my personal page. And then the head of the MLK Association that ran the trolley tour direct messaged me and said, can I share your post? So everyone is looking to growth. And I said, of course, and made it shareable, and I tagged her. And it's just a great way, again, to share your message and generate more publicity. Next slide. So this was the YouTube channel has the actual video of the virtual in-person for Governor Murphy, but not for attendees opening. So they had that there. This is, hashtag Black History Month. So I didn't talk about hashtags again with social media, but just like those calendar dates, there are a lot of hashtags. And when you hashtag something, it takes it and it kind of deposits it, everything that's been hashtagged with that same Black History Month in one place where if you search it, you can then find things that are related to it. So another way to really reach a broader audience. And then the third picture is, Dr. Martin Luther King delivered his powerful speech. Actually, when I looked at this, I thought it was just perhaps the MLK Day and that they did a post about it. And then I read more closely and I thought, oh, wait, and he did it in Cape May. So obviously such a perfect example of generating media for that day. But even if it wasn't that he happened to come in Cape May, similarly, related to civil rights and seeking freedom in Harriet Tubman. Next slide. And on that vein, again, another post, Emmett Till would have celebrated his 79th birthday this weekend on Saturday, July 25th. So, honoring those that have come before us, and also, of course, related to the mission for the Harriet Tubman Museum. In the middle, another thing, so here's a sculpture that just ended up coming in a couple of days before the opening, but they're generating excitement and generating buzz. And so they're taught, she's on her way, action verbs, here's the sculpture. It looks as if the sculpture is actually alive and moving. And then they tag, and that's another way to do it. As I mentioned, how I tagged the MLK executive director, she's tagging the artist, Wellesley Wolford Sculpture Studio. Shows up on his page, shows up on your page, that much more audience. And of course, there's always a donate button, which is great. So I've cut it off in a lot of them. Sharing Michelle Obama's post. This was a video actually of the wonderful John Lewis dancing, and it was just a feel-good, fun video. Michelle Obama posted it. Harriet Tubman Museum shared it. Next slide.
And Maria, just like on the middle one, I love that one. And we had when we did a Q&A with Tara Maharajan, who works at the archives, she talked about social media as well. And I thought it was interesting. She said, whenever you're doing something, like in this instance, right, they're like moving the statue. It's like it's a kind of almost like a behind the scenes, right? Like she's not in place yet, it's being moved in. Tara said that can be so effective for historic societies and historic preservation commissions, because there's a lot of things you might be doing that people don't see. It's kind of a behind the scenes view. Like she even took a picture one time of the archives, and people, she's like, oh, working in the archives today, but it was all the colorful folders, and people loved it. Or I'm trying to think of another example. Like if you're a historic preservation commissioner on a tour and you're like touring a property, like today we're touring a property. So I love that middle one that you're sharing, like that action.
And there's one coming up that is similar to behind the scenes, but thank you, Emily, because I think I wanted to mention, it's the one on the left. Mm-hmm. I wanted to mention the importance of photos, right? So we are so fortunate to have a camera in our pocketbook, in our back pocket, and our, always at the ready. And I find myself, I just take a million photos, I think partially because I'm getting older and I'm forgetting things, but also I love to look at, the way that statue looked as if it was moving amongst the trees, for sure. And then in this case, as you just mentioned, Emily, it's just a photo of some volunteers, and it's really fantastic, working But if nothing's happening during the pandemic and things are slow, let's remind people that we're still here and we're working. Great news, as much tribulation in our world, but we continue to make progress. And, you know, here's some beams and rafters. I mean, it's just a great idea for a post. In the middle, I thought it was funny because it's really, and fantastic, because it's really sort of a meta news post where you're just showing the executive director being interviewed by news media. So all you really see is the back of a computer screen and her in an empty museum, but you're tagging the news media, you're tagging Cindy Mullick, the executive director, you're hashtagging Juneteenth and Harriet Tubman. I mean, it's chock full of a lot of great ways to generate more interest in something that happened, that already happened. And then the final one is an invite to get ready. So one of the other things I don't know if I mentioned about Facebook in particular is that there is an event aspect to it. So you can put interested or going or can't make it. And then that creates a number. And first of all, it lets the creator of the event know who's interested. And then it's just another way to really, ultimately, if you follow the link, to get the tickets. And they have the link there, and they hashtag Black History Month. Next slide. So this was, so again, because I was moving backward, this was one of their first fundraisers. And I just thought that photo is so pretty that I just want to be on that sailboat. And even if I couldn't go, it's sold out, it's too bad, but it makes me think about that event and the museum. And then they have an explanation. Our fundraising event aboard the AJ Meerwald on August 10th is now sold out. We're so grateful, overwhelmed by the tremendous response. And then at the end, you know, but donations are still gratefully accepted via our website. So great use of a photo, good follow-up. And then this final photo, I just thought was a great use of logos that we all recognize, you know, and this is, you know, more of the upcoming for that interview she gave. So tune in tonight, NBC, for Ted Greenberg's, and you know, when it's highlighted like that, he's tagged on it. And then using the NBC logo for both New York and Philadelphia. And that's another thing I wanted to say when we were talking about regional, particularly for border states. If you are near Philadelphia or obviously near New York City, or any other town that borders you, of course, consider that as your outreach, because not, you know, certainly not too far to travel. And I think that's it. Thank you so much, everyone, for listening, and I'm open for any